Hello, everybody. I have got Zain Calcuttawala with me today, and Zain is a producer extraordinaire, an incredible sound engineer, and also a mental health advocate. And welcome to the program, Zain.
Thank you for having me, Arnab.
Hey, no worries. It's great to have you. And let's first things first. Zain Calcuttawala, Zain Calcuttawala. What is the pronunciation that we need to default to here?
Well, I normally just say Zain Calcuttawala. Mm-hmm. That's just how I've always normally said it. I suppose in some situations, so as to not appear too Angrez on account of my own hesitations with that, I do say Zain Calcuttawala, but it's normally just Zain Calcuttawala.
Yes, and we are all insecure about our Hindi pronunciations.
Oh, yes. And if anyone knows anything about me, they know what my Hindi is like. So.
Yes, it varies, it varies for many of us. Okay, I think, your last name is really fascinating to me. I'm super curious about it. I've never encountered anybody with this last name, and it is somehow at once the most Bengali sounding name and also the least Bengali sounding name. Because certainly, Calcutta is not really a Bengali pronunciation, and certainly Calcutta is not.
Sure.
So I mean, I take it at face value, I assume it must mean that your ancestors or your heritage were some folks that were, from Calcutta.
Well, yeah, I have been asked that a lot. Mm-hmm. But the honest answer is that, frankly, nobody knows.
No one knows.
No one knows. I asked my dad this question, and his response to me was, and I quote, "Fuck knows ya." And because I asked him, I was like, "Well, okay, did your dad know?" He's like, "No, man, he didn't know either." So I mean,
and his father before him also did not know, and we have a long tradition.
I presume. It's one of those things that's lost in the sands of time, but one can only assume that, way back when, you may have had, I suppose, immigrants that had come in from East India, and they settled in Gujarat, which is originally where my dad is from. But
is that sort of your cultural background? Is it Gujarati, or what's that like? Is there even a?
So my dad is Bori.
Okay.
And so that's a sect of Shia Islam that is based in Gujarat, and they had settled way back when. I honestly don't know much of the history of it.
I think that's starting to make sense based on some other people that have Wala at the end of their name. Yeah. We a name that I've encountered, Vandrewala, which I think means from Bandra.
Yes, correct.
Right? So that's starting to. Cool. I think we can make some guesses about what's
exactly.
going on in history.
I mean, at this point, your guess is probably as good, if not better, than mine, because it's really one of those things where, if presumably it had been, immigrants that settled in Gujarat, specifically in Surat, mm-hmm. at least for my dad's family at that point in time, the last name was really, as you know, like point of association, Calcuttawala and whatever. So that's essentially where that kind of stuck on. But that's the extent of my knowledge and speculation of where the name came from. Nobody knows.
It's super interesting, and I feel that we've cracked it, honestly. And let this podcast be the thing that we point to that illuminates it. No, I'm just being silly.
Perfect.
Yeah, but I was curious about. I've been curious about that since the day that we met. We worked together on a project by Short Round, and we've certainly bumped into each other a few times since then. And I have to say that you have a lot of different things that you do quite well in the context of music production, but specifically your attention to detail with tracking is something that I know we have some really great other engineers in the scene here who are also really, really quite good at that specific aspect. Our mutual friend Jason is also a guy that's always, experimenting with mic positions and so on. But the thing that that really stood out, as well, it also has to do with the context in which we were working together. But I was just very impressed by your attention to detail and professionalism and perfectionism within the context of tracking and just capturing the best sound.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate that.
So, I mean, that was just more of a comment. I mean, I don't know if you have anything that you want to say about that in terms of,
I mean, it's firstly, again, thank you for that. I really appreciate you saying that. I mean, as far as my response to that, I think for me, I guess as far as my approach to production and engineering is concerned, I mean, I'm generally thinking about the mix at the time of the arrangement, and I'm also in turn thinking about the mix naturally at the time of the recording. So I'm just when I'm thinking, and of course that's evolved over time. It's not as if like I just started recording one day and I was like, yeah, this is how we're going to do it. But if I walk into a studio and I have a pretty clear idea of what the song is and what the arrangement is and what the different instruments are supposed to be doing within that arrangement, it already gives me an idea of how to record those various instruments. Like, for example, if we've got a blaring rock track, but there's an acoustic guitar that is also working along with the strum of the electric guitar, I don't, like, at the outset for me, here's a simple like spitball general example.
Okay, right? let's hear it.
I don't really see the point of, getting a very full-bodied, clean, crisp, high-def acoustic guitar sound in that context, or stereo recording in that context.
Certainly, yeah.
It may work, it may not. Again, it really depends. But just thinking just broadly speaking, like
in that context, you'd want more of the characteristics of the pick.
Yes,
and the shininess to sort of complement the electric guitar, presumably if they're playing the same thing, and
exactly, because in that context, no way is the acoustic guitar going to overpower the electric. No way in hell.
Correct.
The only thing that it does have over it is its strum. So what you might even do sometimes is that instead of even using it, especially if it's a hard strum, you might be better off not using a microphone that's more sensitive, like a condenser. It might be fun and even more jangly still if you use something like an SM57,
right.
like a pretty standard dynamic microphone, which can sound great on acoustic guitar depending on context.
Yep.
So yeah.
No, I mean, and also just the idea of, especially if you know what you have in mind, and this is why it's always great when you're producing, a piece of music. During the creative process, obviously, it's good to be very free flowing and just throwing ideas at the wall, see what sticks. But when it comes to finally doing the thing, at every stage, when it's like arrangement, tracking, mixing, mastering, you don't want to leave anything to the next stage to sort of you compensate in the next stage that really should have been addressed in the stage that came before.
Right? Never.
And we do encounter a lot of that type of scenario. Sometimes we have to do it, right? Like, it's important to have those skills that, okay, like when we were tracking, like we didn't do X, so now in the mix I've got to do Y and Z.
Y, yeah, but, exactly.
And certainly every project that I've tried to take on, more and more you're aiming for this kind of idea that, like, listen, the arrangement's got to be spot on. We want to have the arrangement such that we're not even going to get the chance to mix it. We're thinking that we're thinking as if, like, okay, like this song needs to sound mixed when it's recorded.
Yeah.
And because let's just assume that none of us know how to mix anything. And then then we track it. And this is actually, again, where I really admire your knowledge, because my knowledge of like certain types of gear, certain types of mics and preamps, my preamp knowledge is very impoverished. I'm just sort of getting into understanding different types of preamps, and it's really, I'm still quite stupid in that regard. But even like, say, different types of mic selection, these are types of things that I never had access to. And every project that I do, I learn like a little bit more, whether it's like learning about different types of guitar amps, different types of synthesizers, different types of, and now certainly learning about microphones. And this is something I really admire about you, is that you really kind of understand, which type of mic to select that might be appropriate for the scenario. And I just have the one mic, and I'm always kind of just unless we're going into like an ICS.
I mean, it's funny you say that, because like the second album that Jishnu short round, and I did where I was producing that one. That was between his bedroom and mine for the most part.
Yeah.
And and we were using his microphone. So he's got a Shure, I forget which Shure large diaphragm condenser he's got. But he's got, I think it's a Shure KSM or Shure KM something, KMS. Oh, God. You can totally edit out this part where I'm like spitballing.
Hey,
like
no,
random.
it happens to the best of us. It can't. I have. I mean, I've worked with that exact microphone when I was working with them, and I've forgotten the model number as well. So that happens.
Yes. Wait, I found it because it was driving me crazy. I'm just Googling as we speak.
I figured you would. Yeah.
Yes. The Shure KSM 32. That's the microphone.
Yep, that's the one.
Got.
There you go. Sounds familiar.
That's the one. Yes.
That was the project where I learned that mic model, and I also learned the correct spelling of Gretsch.
Ah, there you go. Yes. I think I learned the correct pronunciation of Gretsch.
What is the correct pronunciation? What is that?
No, I think it's Gretsch.
It's Gretsch.
I think before I used to call it Gresh because I don't know.
Oh yeah, no, that's very sophisticated. It sounds classic. Yeah.
Trust me to try and do that Gresh. But
yeah,
anyway.
no, I think from now on I'm going to just start saying Gresh. I'm going to lead people to believe that they're incorrect in saying Gretsch, and I'm just going to be like, no, actually it's Gresh.
If I am in the room with you, I will totally back you on this one, just for shits and giggles. I'll be like, yeah, guys, get with the program. It's Gresh.
It's Gresh, like, you guys, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we were using the Shure KSM32, and we were using his two pencil condensers, again, a pair of AKGs, which are totally decent. All these microphones were totally decent. I think in hindsight, they were really good budget microphones. They did the job the way they were supposed to do. But those were literally the only three mics that I think we used on 90% of everything that you hear on that album, the With Friends Like These album. And I remember he came to my house. So the very first track of that, which is the intro, which he called Introvert, is just him playing that riff. We recorded that at his house, I think, in just one shot. With those two pencil condensers as an A/B pair. And hey presto, I was like, cool. All of his vocals were done on the KSM. A bunch of other bits and pieces were done with that. So in that context, I basically had those limited resources between his simple PreSonus preamp as well and my Mbox Pro preamp at home. I was like, all right, this is what we got. We've got to try and get it as good as we possibly can in the context that we had.
Yeah.
And that was it. We were lucky that the microphones caught things pretty decently. And I mean, I did have to do a few things in the mix to bring it to the point where I was happy. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you just gotta make it work.
You gotta make it work. You have to, I mean, like when you have the resources to sort of do everything properly at every stage, and the knowledge, then obviously that's what you're gonna want to do. And it also, then again, it helps to have a few brains involved so that you can pull from different people's knowledge in that scenario. But then, you also have to be able to, you do have to be able to sort things out in the mix when you have to do it. And invariably there's going to be some things that you're going to have to sort out in the mix, which is precisely why you want to track things and arrange things in such a way that you assume that you're not going to be able to sort things out in the mix. It's sort of like it's inevitable that things will fall through the cracks. So you have to try to prevent as few things from falling through the cracks, because otherwise you're going to end up with a lot more kind of problems.
Absolutely.
And even at an arrangement level, like I'm kind of notorious for I mean, whoever I work with, I'm always trying to trim down additional layers of instrumentation if I don't feel they're necessary. Or adding anything. And it's like, a lot of people is like, no, we want layers and we want a big sense. Like, I'm not against having lots of layers, but I just know that if I don't consciously try and rein it in, then we're going to end up with a big mess of an arrangement with all these parts that are just like, and that's going to again affect the final result. It's going to affect the coherence of the arrangement. So it's not necessarily that we don't want to have a lot of layers, but if you don't proactively try and remove the useless shit or the stuff that's not really adding something, you're just going to end up
Exactly.
with an unnecessary amount of complexity, and then that reflects in the final product.
Exactly.
As far as I'm concerned.
And that's exactly what I experienced, at one point when I was working with Flying Shoe for his EP that just came out, last month.
Congrats on that, by the way.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks. It was
fun. You produced that as well, right?
Produced and engineered, mixed it. Yeah. And the thing is, so we were working together for a while and the songs very naturally evolved over that time. We started working together 2017 thereabouts. And so yeah, it did take a while for us to get the EP out. But the point is, when we actually got down to tracking, I feel up until recently, and a lot of people who've worked with me will attest to this, that I am an avid fan of the double track.
Yes, and I've noticed this in some of the. Sometimes you haven't seen it recently, but you used to have these little Instagram tips and tutorials, and I did notice quite a few double tracks.
Yes, there are quite a few, but I've kind of started to rein it in a little bit now. I mean, I sort of learned my lesson through the Flying Shoe context, because, and this is a pretty obvious thing, but I think I had to really experience it for myself to really have it ingrained as real knowledge. But like a simple example of, people asking, well, how do you get width on your mixes? Like, how do you get your mixes really wide? I'm like, well, now a simple thing for me is have one thing going on the left and have another thing altogether going on the right. And hey, presto.
not necessarily a double track.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, double tracks can make it sound wide.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's definitely a lot more that the brain kind of like fluctuates between if you've got, one part going on the left and another on the right, or even if it is the exact same part, it could be a completely different instrument with a completely different tone.
Oh, so, You're speaking directly to the choir right here, the choir of one guy who's sitting in his room. Because so one of my favorite books with regards to music production has nothing to do with music production, and also everything to do with music production. Anybody that knows me talk about this kind of that whenever someone's like, hey, do you have like a good book you can recommend on music production? There's this book called 101 Things I Learned in Architecture School. And it is and it's a coffee table book. Like, it's quite small, and it's, you can read it in one toilet sitting. And or wherever you want, obviously, but I
feel like that's how we should estimate time now. How long will it take me to get there? About 1 or 2 toilet sittings.
1.5 toilet sittings. But so pretty much almost every single page. Like, for me, I think architecture is sort of like the mother art form in a certain way. Like, I think every other type of art form is just a type of design. It's all about placement of things, and pretty much every page you turn, you can kind of relate. There's something you can relate to music production in this, and other types of creative forms. But specifically with regard to panning, there's one really interesting page in that book, and it's called it's not called anything. It's basically the format of the book is there's like a really nice image, like a sketch on one page, and then on the opposite leaf, there's just a very concise statement about the drawing. And this particular page, there was a picture of a sketch of a ballerina kind of in a pose, an asymmetric pose. And the statement was, I'm paraphrasing and I'm fucking it up, and it's worded much more elegantly than this, but it's something like the ability to detect a sense of balance without symmetry. Some people believe that the ability to detect a sense of balance without symmetry is a form of higher order intelligence, or higher order something, less condescending than the word intelligence. But so that really got me thinking. And I mean, I was kind of mixing in this way before I even began, because I started off with electronic tracks, way back when I started. And with electronics, like even with say drum patterns, you have multiple hi-hats, you have sometimes you have like a hi-hat and a shaker and a temp. You have these different, it's not just like a drum kit, and so you have these different sort of textures that are playing similar roles in the groove and in the frequency spectrum, but there's some difference, and you sort of pan them in a way that's complementary, but it's not the exact same thing. And then when I started doing rock tracks, this started becoming even more illuminated for me. And so like this idea of balance without symmetry. Like I remember meeting this one engineer fresh out of audio engineering school, and he was one of these like left, center, right mix engineers where like everything in his mix is either hard left, hard right, or center.
The LCR thing,
totally. And it's just like if you like are listening to Bjork and Radiohead and stuff, you're just like, wow, I don't even know how this is what you're doing. But so the balance without symmetry. An example from the first rock album I ever produced was I had a double track where it was an electric guitar playing a chord progression, and we double tracked the exact same chord progression on an acoustic guitar on the right side. And so it's sort of like, okay, it's the same notes that are being played, same rhythm, but two different like types of instruments. And so like what's the difference in the sound of the two instruments? The electric guitar is a little bit overdriven, so it has a little bit of natural compression. The jangliness is not there. The acoustic guitar is giving you some jangliness. And so then we put in, so that's the difference between the two channels. So then it's like, okay, how do I balance this out without creating like a blatant symmetry? And so it's like, well, we have a tambourine, and the tambourine has a jangliness. So it's like on the left channel, we've got the electric guitar, and then the tambourine is there. Again, not hard left, hard right, but there's, and then on the right side, you've got the acoustic guitar. And, there's a hi-hat. Now you can swap that however you want, but it's a sense of balance, but it's not symmetrical. And
exactly.
I find that to be a really, it is very much how I approach panning most of the time, and I like that approach a lot. And so I
agree.
It's interesting that you mentioned that about, moving from a place where you would just go for double tracks and now, evolving to a place where it's like, okay, like maybe I'll pan this hard left and hard right, but they don't have to be the same exact thing.
They don't have to be the same thing, and that's what I meant, because when I was working on the Flying Shoe stuff, there was when we attract double tracks for pretty much everything, and I was like, yeah, cool, I can. I think I could use this. I think I could use that. But when I came down to just before I started mixing, and I was just looking to see where everything was, and as I was just like throwing up the faders and just trying to gauge where everything was going to sit, and I was like, everything just felt a little too homogeneous to me.
Yeah.
Like I was like, all right, fine, I've got a double track of this electric guitar part on the song, and it's nice and ethereal and stuff, and it sounds cool on its own. I bring in the other stuff, I was like, that sounds cool on its own, but when it's all put together, it felt pretty static.
Yeah.
Like it didn't feel like
that's actually the word. Static. Yeah. That's a great word.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like it just didn't feel like everything or anything rather had like its spot in the arrangement.
Yeah.
So I do remember quite literally where I was just like, as I was mixing, I was like, all right, I grabbed all these tracks that were double tracks, and I literally just made all of them inactive, switched them off, and I was like, all right, let me just put all these faders down and just start again. And then as soon as I did that, I was like, oh, this makes sense. I know exactly what I need to do now. And it was almost like where I hit my head, I was like, why didn't I just do this earlier? Like the mix just felt so fluid. And in fact, if you look at the sessions, I hardly have any processing on at all. I mean, the meat and potatoes of my mix on all of the tracks is usually on the master bus, where I have maybe 3 or 4 plugins working at any one time.
Really interesting.
But then, yeah. So, I mean, I usually start from top down. Like I have my faders and all up, and then I get my panning, and then I do most of what my mix will sound like on the master bus itself.
That's really fascinating. That's actually pretty novel to me.
Is it? I mean, like, I in fact, that's how I was sort of taught. Like, for example, Andrew Sheps is one of those guys who was like, if you're going to put stuff on top of your mix after you've done all the processing, you might kind of be shooting yourself in the foot, because you're just going to throw your balance completely out of whack. So for me,
what type
it's
of
just
things
like,
would you be putting on your master bus to start?
The first thing I usually put on my master bus, pretty much 9 times, well, actually now it's 10 times out of 10, is a trim plugin, the standard Pro Tools trim plugin.
Oh, I love that plugin.
Yes, and all I'm doing with that is just gradually pulling down my overall level that is going into my main 2 bus.
Interesting.
Simply because, as I'm starting to put an additive EQ, or as I'm compressing stuff or parallel compressing stuff, naturally the levels of stuff over time will start to accumulate and they'll start to go up. So what I do is that I've got a trim plugin over there, and by the end of it, I'm usually dialing that back by about a dB or maybe a dB and a half. And that's just to prevent, any compression and stuff that I add on my my two bus to really overact. I do not want over compression on my two bus at all, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's usually the first thing I have on there. I usually touch that once I've dove deep into the mix. Or dived.
I don't know. Let's
I don't know where that came from.
Yeah,
I've dived deep into the mix. But the thing that usually follows that is a subtractive EQ.
Right.
That subtractive EQ is just getting rid of any of the stuff that I don't need.
Again, on the two bus.
Again, on the two bus.
Wow.
That is, and this is EQ that, I'm a lot more mindful of it now, in that, before, I would make this mistake when I was starting off. Again, like I said, pretty much since I started off, I'd always start from the top down with my mixes. So, but the mistake I used to make before is that as I threw up all my faders and I got them to a balance where I really liked, maybe one element or maybe two elements. For simple example, let's just take one element for right now. Maybe there was one element that had a resonant frequency that I just didn't like. Maybe the bass, for example, had a bit of like a boominess around 100 hertz that popped up now and again, but it didn't really pop up all the time. But what I would do way when I started is that with that subtractive EQ, I would cut it 100.
Right.
To the point where, like, okay, fine, when those notes popped out, they didn't really bother me. But now as a consequence, since it's on my two bus,
You're losing a punch.
I'm losing the punch. Yeah. So the things that now, when I bring up my faders and my pan to a point where I feel like everything is balanced, I'm just still listening out for any sort of anomalies that I don't think are necessary, that might be getting in the way of my balance. If I by chance hear something like that on the bass, what I will do is that instead of me jumping straight to my two bus, I will have a little bit of compression on the bass or maybe an EQ on the bass to control that. So now I'm just like at a point where, like, okay, fine. Now on its own, with this minute bit of processing, my bass is now sitting a little bit comfortably. That boominess is not coming out anymore. I've addressed that.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's anything else in that regard as well, maybe if a vocal opens up and there's like a nasaliness or something that comes out around 2 or maybe 3K, I will just address that at that point as well. Maybe with a dynamic EQ. So maybe when the vocal gets louder, it's only then that you get a little bit of a dip. And as soon as the vocal gets softer again, that dynamic EQ isn't really doing too much. So, and these are very minute changes. I'm not doing anything too drastic here. I'm just trying to control. I have high pass filters on basically all of my sub mixes except for my kick and except for my drums and my bass, pretty much.
Right.
Depending on the arrangement. So my lows and my low mids are generally controlled from the get-go. So now I've got this basic balance. There's minimal processing going on at this point. And then now this is when I add, my subtractive EQ, where I usually find, because these are the problem areas, anywhere between 150 to maybe 300 or usually around 500. Those are just places where more often than not, I find stuff that I feel is unnecessary, a bit honky or a bit muddy or a bit boomy. And so I just get rid of those. And I'm talking about, when I say get rid, I'm talking about not more than like 2 dB.
That's really interesting. I find this fascinating. I mean, your mixes sound amazing.
Thank you.
But it's also like very much fully the opposite way in which I work. Like I start with the individual tracks, and I usually I'll try and I won't do the panning until the end. Like I'll not the
really?
end. Yeah, not the end, but sort of close to the end. Like I'll try to be like,
interesting.
So what I do is I try to get, especially like it changes for genre, but like let's just take like an electronic track where I've got like some drum sounds and I want to get the drum sounding good before anything else. So I'll try to get my levels up where I want, and I'll keep everything in mono. And then I will,
interesting.
And then I'll add EQs to the individual, drum sounds, such that I can hear all of the drums clearly in mono, like all the different,
Right.
yeah. And so if I can hear, and then this goes on for the overall mix as well, whatever it is, synths, guitars, like try to make sure that I can hear everything in mono, and then I know that I've made the right EQ decisions, and then I know that like there's hopefully some mono compatibility when the whole thing gets collapsed. Then once I think I can hear everything pretty clearly in mono, then I make the decisions, which at this point I feel I can do pretty quickly, of how I want to pan things. And then I get even more clarity and separation.
That is interesting. Yeah, that is a very different way. We work in very different ways.
But that's amazing, because I mean, like anyone will give a testament to the quality of your mixes. So it's really interesting that we can both work in such different ways. So I definitely come at it the other way. Then it really also does change depending on genres. Like, I mean, there's records where you're working with like so many tracks. It's a rock band. Like I was doing the Cognac Net. That's like 3 guitar players, all that kind of business. But then like recently I've been working on my own. I have a beat tape that's coming out pretty soon. And that is, it's really funny to look at the Pro Tools sessions for the beat tape, because it's like such a small amount of tracks. It's basically like with the 2 beat tapes that I've got coming out, was the one that's coming out quite soon. Sleepless in Ontario West is the name of it. And it's basically like I've just chopped up old Hindi songs. And I've sort of intentionally limited myself to only adding drum samples and one synth just for a bass line. So I've intentionally limited what I've got to work with. And usually the samples, I'm bouncing that down as a stereo, like a single stereo performance, like the chopping of the samples. And then I've got like each drum sound on an individual track, and the bass I usually split up into, it's a synth bass, so I usually split it up into one that's just the subs, usually the sine wave.
Gotcha.
That kind of thing. But these beats are sort of the most minimalist thing that I've ever had to mix. So it's really interesting. Like I'm just going in, doing a lot of precision mixing on just the sample bounce, and trying to figure out like, how do I get these sample, like, especially if it's an old Hindi song, there's all these weird resonant frequencies and hiss and stuff like that, that you kind of have to rein in,
figure a workaround.
Yeah, exactly. But I find your method of this top down thing, it's actually the first time I've heard it, and I think it's really, really interesting. I mean, it's just the way I've always kind of done it, and I feel based on the influences that I have, like, so Andrew Sheps is a guy that I've actually picked up a lot from. In fact, a lot of my mix template comes from his mix template, to be honest. And I remember when I first started, I didn't do top down. I would usually start with all the individual tracks, and then eventually start slapping stuff onto the master bus. But then it's just out of habit now that once I've gotten my general fader and pan mix, that's when I decide to I start messing around with the master, and that's usually the track that has the most processing on it. I mean, over the years it's been a lot, but I've tried to with just getting better at what I do, my objective, of course, has been to try and minimize the amount of processing I have on my master bus. So like, for example, on the Flying Shoe, some of the Flying Shoe songs, I think I've got maybe 3, maybe 4 plugins at most on my master bus. But if you look at the rest of the session, like Paper Boats, or even like basically all the acoustic guitars that we recorded for it, it was all very intentional. We recorded at Island City Studios. They have quite a generous a selection of mics to choose from. Well, sorry to quickly interrupt, but I guess this must, and I think you're probably getting around to saying this anyway, but I guess the reason why you can do that is because you pay such close attention in the tracking phase. Like, it makes more sense when put it in that context, Like, I've always just been such a DIY, like, not like, it's only been pretty recently that I've had the chance to go into these nice studios and have all this gear that's way above my pay grade, but
it's above mine too.
Yeah, well, all of ours, I think, but like, I think now that I think about it, it makes a lot of sense in terms of how you are as a tracking engineer, right? Like, if you are paying that much attention to capturing the sound, then it makes sense that you would have a lot less processing on each individual track.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, actually.
Yeah. Because like even on these, so when we recorded the acoustic guitars, the way it worked was Sid and I, Sid being, Sid Talwar being the guy I work with, he's a friend and colleague. We compose and produce together for like ads, short films, mobile games, blah, blah, blah. So we together bought a acoustic guitar, like a 10,000 rupee Yamaha, which frankly sounds like a 35 to 40,000 rupee acoustic guitar. It sounds really nice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean it's total bang for buck. Like I forget which model number it is, but it's the best 10,000 rupees.
There are some really good cheap acoustic guitars out there. I mean, I have this. I have a one that I got for 5,000 rupees that I quite like.
There you go. Right, like it's great. So like we had that. We had Omkar's guitar, which was a chord guitar, and the way we set up the mics was we had 4 different setups. We had 2 different pairs in XY form, in an XY setup, and we had 2 other mono mics as single pickup mono mics, and so for Paper Boats, like being one of the songs, I got him to sit in front of one pair of the mics, and I was like, all right, play the main riff. He's like, okay. I was like, cool. Now get the other guitar, play like that. He was like, cool. He did that. I was like, all right, so jump to the next pair of mics, take the other guitar, play. And I was like, cool. I was like, all right, what about the other guitar? Play. And then based on that, we decided, all right, so we're going to use this pair of mics with that guitar for this song. We're going to use that pair of mics with that guitar for this song. And I also knew that for the songs Paper Boats and Tonight, those arrangements were, I mean, at least the way the acoustic guitar was played was a lot easier and a lot smoother. So I was like, I knew that I wanted the guitar to be front and center, very focused, but still have a stereo feel, which is why I did it in an XY form, because even though you're getting a stereo sound with XY is a lot more focused. So you have your stereo image that is still pretty much centered. So it works out for great mono compatibility, yippee, and the vocals front and center too.
Interesting.
So I did that with Tonight, and I did that with Paper Boats. But for Roller Coaster, which was the 3rd song, because there was a lot more happening with that, like it sort of feels like a happy, bouncy, like Jack Johnson-y song. And the way he's played the riff, I was like, you know what? Let's double track the acoustic guitar this time, except we'll use one guitar on one mic and we'll use another guitar on another mic. This way, having to eliminate the idea of me having to use EQ at all to differentiate between the two guitar double tracks.
Is something we have in common. I mean, not just like, I usually don't have the luxury of using different mics, but certainly if I've got a guitar player that wants to do a double track, I'm just like, you're not allowed to use the same guitar. You're not allowed to use the same amp. I don't care. Let's find a new amp. Like I'm pretty stubborn about this. And sure enough, if I do have access to different mics, I will even if I don't even know a lot about the difference. Like the difference in detail of the 2 mics, I'll still just be like swap out the mic. Come on, that's just because that makes such a difference in when it comes to stereo width. If you have that differentiation in texture, you're gonna get the width. And there are so many interesting ways of doing that. A way that I tried recently, like to make a single tracked guitar sound really loud. I think I picked this trick up from Keshav. Actually, I heard him talk about it, and this is the first time I really gave it a try. And it was like, you pan one guitar, however you want, to whatever side, and then on the opposite side, you use like a special reverb, like not necessarily a reverb that you want to sound like a reverb, like a room, but just like a strange reverb, And that's also another option of how you can get like a wide sound. So there's multiple ways of doing that and creating like that separate texture for the it's cool. It's very cool. Now that I'm hearing you say all this, like I saw you do this when we were tracking with Short Round, but kind of hearing you talk about it in so much more detail, it makes me think that if we get the chance to work together again, I'd really want to like sit with you about like what we're going for.
Oh, of course, man.
Beforehand, because like if we have the chance to really put our heads together, about in terms of what we want the final product to sound like, there's a lot that we can get done in the tracking phase, a lot more even.
Absolutely.
It's really cool to hear about this. There's lots of other stuff I want to ask you about. We could probably talk about just production for ages, and I'm sure we
could. We really could, I think.
I would like to know just a bit about how you, because like all this knowledge you've acquired, I certainly, it's a way above my pay grade, and I assume you learned a lot of this stuff when you were studying music production, which is something that I didn't get to do formally, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I did learn a lot, and I'm really, really grateful for what I learned when I was in London, which is where I studied.
Where were you studying? What was the name of the place?
I studied at a college called Alchemia, which was very close to, it's kind of like equidistant between Angel Station and Highbury and Islington, for anyone who's familiar with London.
Yeah, I got a vague London knowledge from my early 20s.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, the school isn't around anymore. I mean, they closed down just because life and overheads and landlords with rent deciding to
London
up
rent is like is bananas.
Yeah. And I mean, it was unfortunate because the gear that they had was absolutely spectacular. They had from what I remember, I think it was a 24 channel G series or 32 channel SSL G series.
Wow.
And because that was an old school desk from the 70s, that literally had to be on 24/7. That sucks out a shit ton of power.
Yep.
And they had an SSL duality as well, a 24-track SSL duality. They had 2 tape machines, so I learned how to use tape. I haven't used tape since 2013, so I won't say I know how to use tape anymore. They had an old Soundcraft 1624, I think it was. But anyway, and they had like a programming room with a couple of like analog synths. They had really nice outboard gear. Just around the time we left, they got this really nice Briscotti reverb. They had a couple of Calrec EQs, which were kind of like similar to what the Pultec EQs were like. They had some really, really nice stuff.
The Pultec EQs are some of my favorites.
Yeah. They're breathtaking. Yeah. Usually you'll find a Pultec EQ on my master bus. But they are
actually quite cool for mastering.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah. I mean, I just you can really push those EQs.
Yes,
they sound lovely.
That's why I love them. Even the mid EQ, like the mid Pultec, I love those ones on electric guitars, particularly overdriven and distorted electric guitars. And it's absolutely true. You just push them like right to like 7, 8, 9, like, and it's like, cool, like no problem.
Exactly.
I don't know of any other EQ that I like can push that hard.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of one either, but this is, I guess, something that is just like inherent to a passive EQ, where the idea is, you're not bringing the signal, like the thing with passive EQs is that you're not, once a signal has gone into the EQ, what's happened is that it's kind of like the circuitry has brought the overall level of that signal down. But as you start to boost, like say a particular band of it, what's happening is that band is now going up to its original actual level. And then at the output of your EQ, you've got an amplifier, and that's bringing up the entire level overall. So technically, within the circuitry of the EQ itself, there is no actual gain that is happening. What's happening is that the entire signal is being attenuated, and as you boost, it's coming closer to its original level. It's the amplifier at the end that brings up the overall level.
Wow, that's really fascinating.
So I mean that, and just by design, that's why a lot of people feel that passive EQs are very, very natural sounding. You can really push them, and it still sounds pretty musical, and that's true. And the Pultec is an example of a passive EQ. Active EQs, which are of course now more ubiquitous nowadays, and especially the kinds of EQs that you'll find on any desk, the SSL EQs being those, they can be more aggressive, but of course they can still, of course, sound very musical. But this is just like a nutshell with how they work.
Chris Lord-Alge will just push it like regardless.
I mean, I think that's why, like, when I use the SSL EQ and I've seen the way Chris Lord-Alge does it, I'm like, man, if it works for you, fuck it, it's gonna work for me for sure. So, so yeah, there you go. But yeah, like to go back to your original question, I mean, I learned a lot when I was there, and I'm really, really grateful for it.
When were you over there again? I'm sorry if I missed the.
I was there for most of 2013. The course was 9 months long.
Okay.
And I mean, of course, there's only so much you can learn in 9 months, but it was a very intensive 9 months, which again I was very grateful for.
Yeah, when you have a studio with like that kind of gear and you're around it all the time, you know, that's
absolutely. Yeah, and it was amazing, and I've come to realize how, even from a tracking perspective, how useful it is to be in an environment like that, because you're just able to make such well-informed decisions just based on what you're listening to. But that was really just like the beginning of me figuring stuff out. I mean, that was just like the start. I've really picked up everything that I've learned till now, over the past few years of me doing this as a freelancer. And that's come from, the classic going through tutorials and the various like paid ones as well, like mixed with the masters and whatnot. But I feel like a lot of my technical knowledge really has come in the last year and a half that I've been teaching. Because
I didn't even know you'd been teaching.
Yeah, I've been teaching at TSM since January last year.
Oh, amazing! That's quite cool. TSM is it's a lovely institution, lovely facility they have there.
Yes,
it was my introduction to the Bombay scene in a way, right? Like
Oh, really?
I met. I met Garun. Somebody just gave me, an auntie gave me his number, and he was just he was nice enough to just sort of take me under his wing. And the first day that I, take me under his wing, so to speak, socially at least, right? He like took responsibility for me, and made sure that I got introduced to people and made friends. But the first day we met, he took me to TSM, and there was like a master class going on over there, and I was just amazed by the
amazing
place, yeah. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's like you said, it's a great space, and there's some really cool people who teach there, and the head of the sound department, Kishore Banan is his name. He's a lovely guy. He's been in this game for 25 years, something like, no, or maybe more. I can't remember now. But he is an engineer in the true sense of the term. His technical knowledge is profound. He knows a lot about a lot of things. And my background, even though I was in a sound engineering music production institute, we were, of course, taught technical aspects of it, without a doubt. But I would by no means call myself someone who's very technical. A lot of the time, when you
That's surprising to hear, because I'm again...
Oh, dude, a lot of shit just goes right above my head. You give me equations, you talk to me about my electronics knowledge is quite shit, to be honest with you. To the point where it's embarrassingly bad, I think. At least.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not particularly good with circuitry and signal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's stuff that I want to learn. I feel like the last few times where I've tried, though, it's just kind of gone right over my head. But I mean, it's something that I've just been pushing myself to learn. Also because, based on the stuff that Kishore has been teaching, he and I have, of course, gotten a bit more of a rapport over time. But there are certain things in the syllabus that he expects the kids to know. And there were some things for me that I kind of had a surface knowledge on, and I had to basically go in and learn it before I taught it. I can't look at a book and just recite words, because I would hate to learn that.
Teaching is the best way to learn, as they say.
Yes, exactly. And I would hate to learn that way as well. Like if I had a teacher that just didn't give a shit and then just came in and just recited stuff out of a book and expected me to learn it, I'd be like, okay, whatever. So I mean, I tried my best to get it to a point where I could basically explain this as simply to anybody, because that's how you've learned it, right? You can explain it in simple English to anybody. Someone who knows nothing about sound should be able to understand it. That's always been my objective.
Yeah, so that's a good objective.
Yeah, so I mean, and it's really been, and I've had to read a lot in the last year as a consequence of that. And so a lot of articles, a lot of things where I had doubts, I had to go up and check. I'd watch tutorials, I'd read some more. Has this technical knowledge informed my practical decisions? Sure. Not in like a profound way, like, oh my God, night and day, but it's definitely something as simple as learning in more detail the topology of compressors, for example.
Good word, topology. I'm a pure math guy, and my favorite subject in pure mathematics was topology. So,
I'm using it totally in the abstract context right now.
Yeah, I know, but it's a good word. It's a good word.
Yeah, I mean, so just like fine, we may know what to expect when we're using, say, electronics LA2A. We may have an idea of what to expect when we're using a URI 1176. But for the life of me, up until, pretty recently, I was still kind of vague about, what you were getting if you were using an opto compressor versus a FET versus a VCA. But then once I started really getting into understanding how those are constructed and how the design or how the architecture of those compressors, you can generally get an idea of what to expect when you're using those kinds of compressors. For me, it just made it easier to be like, okay, if I've got a really aggressive, like for example, if I've got a really aggressive vocal or a vocal that I want to have be a little bit more aggressive, I kind of jump for a FET compressor straight away because I know that FETs have like a certain color to them, they have a certain grit, they have a certain bite, and I like that. Like the 1176 is a perfect example of that.
It's a great compressor.
Yeah, and or for example, if I'm using an opto, which I know is a lot slower in its response, it's not linear in its attack or release. I know that I can use that on something that may be a lot gentler, like on a vocal that just needs, and also it has tubes in it. So if I need something that just needs a little bit of like gentle love around the low mids and maybe just a little bit of high mid openness, shall we say, I know I'm going to jump, and just a little bit of dynamic control, I know I'm going to jump for an opto compressor like the LA2A, stuff like that. So just those little, just understanding the architecture of these particular designs.
That knowledge is essential. Well, I shouldn't say essential because I don't necessarily have it, but it's illuminating is probably a better word rather than essential because it's just listening to you talk about it is illuminating for me. I learned everything in very much a different way, right? Like I learned everything on my own and in the box, and also I was like, for so long scared to buy plugins. And like I was just had the mentality of a starving artist. So for years, I would just use the stock Pro Tools plugins. And so for a long time, it was just, in a way that worked to my advantage in the sense that I had to just learn what a compressor does and how to use a compressor without thinking about what compressor to use. And then I had to like learn how to use just an EQ without making a decision about what EQ to use, that kind of thing. So that finally, like, so now it's really fun to have this knowledge filled in. Like, okay, like a FET versus, an opto passive EQ, like now, like, so now it's like I'm not, because the one thing that I have noticed is when someone sort of learns all this stuff at an institution, and then they just go right in to picking different compressors just because I heard this one sounds cool or I heard this one has a cool coloring, but then they're not doing the main job of compressing like that. They've somehow omitted the like part where you're supposed to like dial in the compressor to actually compress with the whatever you're dealing with, or using the EQ to cut the actual the muddiness or boost whatever you need to boost. So it's a lot of fun talking to you because it seems like we've come to mixing and engineering from such different angles, and it's very illuminating to just hear your perspective. And also it just goes to show that like mixing is it's a lot more of an art than it's a science. There's all this sort of precise knowledge that is helpful and often required. But there's no single right answer. There's a lot of wrong answers. But there's a lot of different ways to do something. And just this conversation we're having just shows the so many different approaches. And I think when it comes to mixing, especially somebody who's maybe not familiar with mixing, they've started music production and they're just putting tracks together and doing their faders or whatever without too much thought. I think a lot of people have this thing in their mind this idea in their mind that there's like something like a standardized good mix. Like this is a good mix. This specific thing is what a good mix is. Anything that deviates from that is really not a good mix. And and what we find as we continue on is that there's many different kinds of good mixes. There's lots of there's lots of ways to fuck up a mix. There's infinitely many bad mixes.
Sure.
But there's so many different approaches you can take, and it's really interesting to hear about your journey. It is so different than mine. But you know, that's it's a good thing. It's really interesting to hear. You know, how all this knowledge can come together, and then you know, when we have a conversation like this, we can put it all together. You know, all the different approaches we have. So yeah, it's super fascinating. I also feel like to that end, this is also something that is, I feel like a problem over here is that I feel a lot of people in this scene kind of see music production and sound engineering as almost mutually exclusive. Yes.
And I feel like that is a fundamental problem because you, at the end of the day, what are you working on, right? You're working on music. How can you claim to be a sound engineer when you are kind of like disregarding the concept of music altogether and you're just kind of looking at frequencies?
Yep.
To me, that makes no sense at all.
And on the other end, you have producers who are like, I don't really do mixes, you know, and it's like, you don't even try? Like, what do you mean? Like, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I don't understand either, where producers are just kind of like, yeah, whatever, just let the engineer do it.
Yeah.
Or like, there might be producers where you know, you spend some time setting up, say, a microphone for a producer to record something. And then as soon as the producer just gets ready to record, they just grab the microphone and just move it to a place where they think it should be, just so it can be louder and more proximity. And I was like, motherfucker, what do you think I was just doing for the past 5 minutes?
Wow, that's crazy, yo. I'm shocked to hear that.
You're just kind of like, okay, now I can hear it in my headphones. I'm like, God damn it. But anyway, like you know what, you got to ride the wave on some occasions.
Oh, of course, yeah. I find, and I mean, this is me just being slightly jerky, I don't know, but the more I go on, the more experience I get, the more I can feel that I don't have to ride that flow too much, you know what I mean? It's like in the beginning, like when nobody knows who you are and you have no kind of reputation, you kind of have to, like somebody does some crazy shit and you go like, oh God, I gotta figure out how to work around this. Yes. but like now I more and more with every single project I get and that I take, and you know, I certainly have some faith in my own competence as a producer and engineer. So it's like, listen, no, like, look, we're not doing that. You know, like, come on.
Exactly.
Like, chill.
Yeah, I agree. And it feels good sometimes, like, especially because when I was starting off, I suppose I was very subservient because I felt a lot of the time way out of my depth and not really knowing what the fuck I was doing.
I still feel like that sometimes.
You're right. But I shouldn't say I shouldn't. I still do too.
We're always learning, but in the beginning, especially because, you know, it's an industry where like it's not like people are offering to pay you a lot of money from the jump, and you can get quite good at what you're doing and have a good reputation, and people still may not be willing to pay you a lot. So so that affects your ego in terms of how you relate to what you do, right? Like, you know, the fundamental contradiction of being a producer in this day and age is like, you know, you feel you are a starving artist, you're broke, and that means that in your off time, you often maybe don't feel so great about yourself, you know, like in terms of just value, and that does affect, you know, your sense of worth. But then, like, you're a producer and you're supposed to be an authority, you're supposed to be in charge, you're supposed to know, not only were you supposed to know what to do, but you have to have the juice and the gumption to say, look, no, what the hell are you doing? No, stop that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or no, we're going to do it later.
Exactly.
Like, that's a bad idea. Like, I'm sorry, that's not what we do here. Like, so that is a difficult thing to balance. And, you know, I'm always getting over it. And I'm always trying to figure out the right balance between being open and being, and, you know, listening. Like, there's a difference between being subservient, which certainly is not desirable, but on the other hand, you do want to be open. Like, if somebody's making a suggestion that maybe you didn't think of, you want to be open to that. But on the other hand, people be making all kinds of weird suggestions. Like, you know, like there is that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm open to suggestions. I mean, sometimes when my insecurities flare up, I'm just like, if if the other person sounds very informed and stuff, I might find myself second guessing, like, maybe I should have thought of that. Why didn't I think of that? But I kind of take it with a pinch of salt now. Like you said as well about yourself, where I have a little bit of faith in my skills right now. Not to say that I know everything that I'm doing, because by no stretch of the imagination would I say that.
We're always learning.
I have, like, of course, always learning. But then, like, and I'm always open to ideas. But then, it's like, you're at the end of the day, you decide whether or not you're going to take that advice or not, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But it's interesting what you said about when our insecurities flare up, because it is like with the thing we do is constantly under scrutiny, not just from the person we work with, but it's given to so and so for feedback, and then there the people that are giving their feedback maybe also speaking from a place of insecurity, and it can be a crazy cycle, and it's a difficult thing to balance for sure.
100%. I'm always like on tenterhooks whenever I send something to someone for feedback for. Like, I'm just kind of like, all right, guys, I hope, fingers crossed.
I'm getting better with it. But I still get there sometimes. I still get to the low place.
Totally.
Well, again, like we could continue talking about music production, and we will come back to it, I think. But this is an interesting segue into your advocacy for mental health, and in particular, like as freelancers. In a creative industry that's really volatile. We've already mentioned some of the insecurities and stuff that come along with it. There's the financial instability. There's the weird working hours. The mental health is, it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I wouldn't minimize anybody in any other type of industry, whether they're working a 9 to 5 or whatever it is.
Sure.
It's something we all have to go through in our own ways. But
right.
Certainly I struggle with it a lot as a freelancer with just all of the uncertainty, instability, odd hours, weird feedback, clashing egos. Yep. And so I don't know where you'd like to start, but there's the advocacy that you do, and then there's maybe perhaps some thoughts you have on this yourself. How you deal with it, how maybe sometimes you don't deal with it, or so maybe like where would be a good place to?
I mean, I think it's fair kind of like to look at the I suppose how I deal with the advocacy of it, being that I just like let me rephrase that. Zain, retrace your steps. All right. I think it's fair to start on the on how I probably deal with it, because like in terms of the advocacy, it is out there as a podcast, and this is something that we started a couple of years ago, and we're super grateful for that.
What's the name of the podcast? Just to let people know.
It's called Marbles Lost and Found, and it's basically, thankfully, it's anywhere that you can get your podcasts from. So it's like Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and on the IVM website, which is the podcast company in Bombay that we recorded with. It's also on their website too. So it's great. It's also on Spotify, YouTube, blah, 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 blah.
Nice. All the socials have been...
Basically, all the socials, yes. And it's with me and... a friend of mine and our co-host Avanti, who is a psychotherapist by profession. So we just talk either about our own stories, but we also bring people in and we talk to them about their stories. But we also cover a whole myriad of topics, everything from like debunking myths about lesser understood mental illnesses. We talk to people about things like addiction. We talk to other professionals about mental health in kids and how a kid's psyche informs how they will behave well into their adult years. Mm-hmm. We talk about things like toxic masculinity. We talk about what caregiving is, what to expect when you go into therapy, how to deal with grief. And there's a whole myriad of stuff that is in there. And some of it is a lot more lighthearted and approachable. A couple of things in there do have a few trigger warnings because it can get heavy on from time to time. Mm-hmm. But I think that, talking specifically about what you said about how we deal with mental health issues through the uncertainty that we have specifically, like you said, it's not to make it out as if, we're some special breed or anything. Everyone deals with mental health issues. But specifically in our context, how I deal with it and how I frankly, sometimes don't deal with it. Yeah, we all have shit days.
Yep.
I think what has helped me more recently is that I've started to allow myself to feel like shit.
Okay.
In that, and what I mean by that is, when there are days that come up where I just feel really fucking lousy, I would also kind of, in some ways, kick myself for feeling like shit. Like, oh man, you've been through this already. You don't need to beat yourself up for this all over again. Like, come
yes.
on.
The death by two swords, as they say.
Yes, exactly. Death by two swords. So when the days come up where I'm actually feeling lousy, I'll just be like, all right, this is what it's gonna be. I will sit with it for as long as I can. I will try not to give myself a hard time with it for as long as I can. And I will allow it to run its course. If this is by chance to do with someone else, like maybe someone else has said or not said something or done or not done something that has really gotten me on edge, and I will feel I'll feel myself flare up, but I'll try and just like not deal with it straight away. I was like, maybe this is something that I just have to deal with on my own. Maybe it's my own insecurity. Let me just write this one out, get present with the feelings, see how I'm feeling. What is the physicality of it? Where is it kind of like eating at me? Is it in my chest? Is it in my head? Is it in my gut? Like, where is it? Just try and sit with it, allow it to pass, do things that just kind of keep myself otherwise occupied. But if I feel that over a particular period of time, and by period of time, I mean, it could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months, where this feeling hasn't as such really subsided, but it just kind of goes away for a time. And as soon as I grab onto a thought that is related to it, it just flares up all over again. Mm-hmm. It comes to a point where I realize, all right, man, I've got to talk to this person about this shit because it's clearly not going away on its own.
Yeah.
And that is sometimes, a lot of the time, really hard to do, depending on what it is you need to talk to someone about.
Yep.
But I've found that whenever I do, my peace of mind is just so much more easily attainable. Whether it's kind of like the only way I can, the thing that it's analogous to in my head is it's like a purge, when you've just drank too much but you think that you have it in you to just like write it out and be like, yeah, this should be fine. I know I feel a little like uneasy, but you know what, I'm fine. I'm not going to throw up.
Yeah, that moment when you accept that you are going to throw up and you commit to it and you do it. And then it's just like afterwards, you're like, man, I'm so glad I just vomited.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, and the vomiting is fucking horrible. It's kind of like, oh, fuck, my life choices. What have I done?
Yeah, you got to go through it.
But you got to go through it. Yeah, you sweat through it and all of that, and you feel like shit and you look like shit. But as soon as it's all out, you're just kind of like, okay, I can breathe again.
Yeah. No, that's it's a comical analogy, but it's also profound.
Oh yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like the essence of everything that I find myself dealing with, the core of it always boils down to communication. And I mean, it sounds like a cliche to the point where it's almost cheesy now, but it's not like. I don't mean it in the sense of like, hey, let's talk about how you feel and your feelings, and to be fair, there is merit to that.
There is merit to that.
There's a lot of merit to that.
Sometimes it can be overdone, yeah, for sure. But.
Yeah, in an over dramatized like pop culture way. Like,
yeah, it becomes
how does that
performative.
make you feel? Yeah, exactly. And that's not what I mean. But the things that if you do have I feel like my biggest problem, or let me not call it problem. I say like my biggest hurdle as a person is that because of the insecurities that I have kind of lead me to believe that in some way I am wrong when I'm feeling uncomfortable. Like it's my problem or my insecurity or whatever that is leading me to feel like this. It's not really about what the other person has done or whatever. But the problem with that, and sometimes that can be profound where, where very rarely do things affect you. But then the flip side of that coin is that you kind of disregard your own feelings a lot of the time. And you're just kind of like, you know, even though you do feel uneasy, you're just trying to either deny or negate that altogether. It's like, no, I shouldn't be feeling like this. I shouldn't be feeling like this. And you just don't allow yourself to feel upset. You're just making yourself feel wrong for feeling upset.
Yeah.
And that sucks.
Feeling upset is often a rational response to the circumstances.
Yeah, and it's totally valid, you know. And the things that you maybe the other person didn't intend to hurt you in the way that they may have. It may not have even crossed their minds, but just based on who you are as a person, you feel the way you feel. And it's only recently that I've started to validate my own feelings, where I was like, you know what? To some people, this might be an irrational response, but I am allowed to feel the way that I feel.
Yeah.
What is important is how I deal with that irrationality. If I go out then to make the other person feel wrong, or if I do something that is you know, in some way manipulative, where like, okay, something simple as, you know what, I will not respond to this email, or I'll start being monosyllabic to the point where the other person just starts to naturally pick up that there's something up, so they're confused. If you start doing that shit, which is, you know, we sometimes naturally do that sometimes, that's not the healthy way to deal with it.
That's profound. That's profound. You know, what you said about communication. And there's the sort of pop culture-y version of like, hey, let's talk about, you know, it's that kind of thing. But what you're talking about is really about communication. It's like, oh, you know, the things that go unsaid. Oh, you know, when you become monosyllabic, or maybe this other person didn't intend to something, but then I took it the wrong way, and then I became monosyllabic, and then that person caught the vibe. Like, that's really at a deeper level. I think you've hit on something. That, you know, it's quite different than that performative, you know, like, let's talk it out, and, you know, for sure. And it's like, no, like we're real human beings, and we really feel jostled sometimes by each other, and, you know, like it's not
Absolutely.
like it's just talking it out doesn't necessarily mean like it's going to be this really pleasant. Like, it might actually be a difficult conversation, or it might require one or both of us to swallow our egos for a moment, or for an extended period of time to.
Oh yeah.
You know that's the profound part of it. I mean,
There was a very useful conversation, or a very helpful conversation I had with a very close friend of mine quite recently, a couple of months ago, and I personally believe that she is very, of course, not without her own struggles, but she is very well attuned to how to deal with her emotions in a very constructive, effective way. And she had a hypothesis which was kind of different from my own sort of internal narrative or internal dialogue, where she's like, look, you have people who care about you, right? And I was like, yeah. She's like, oh, how about let's for a second give the people who you care about, and in turn care about you, the benefit of the doubt, wherein, you know, they are not actively going out of their way to upset you or hurt you. Yeah,
it sounds simple, but it's like we fail to do that so often.
Yeah. And I mean, look, it because of my insecurities, one of my biggest insecurities for even till date, but I have a pretty good inkling of where it comes from. So, but like, one of my things is that I deep down, I believe that the people who are in my life are actually kind of politely tolerating me rather than actively want me in their life.
I get that feeling all the time. I'm right there with you on that. So, you know,
it's a bitch. It's
a pain. To clarify, I get that feeling about myself, not about you. I enjoy your company very much. I'm not tolerating.
Okay, I enjoy yours very much as well.
But yeah, I feel the same way too. It's like, man, am I being an imposition on even like my very good friends, right? Like that, you know, have taken me in on and fed me on many. It's like, man, am I, you know?
Exactly. And the things that, and one thing that I can't help, I mean, I'm working on, but one thing I struggle with is when I do have a argument or a fight with someone I care about, in the back of my mind, it's like, okay, this is like a breakup fight. You know what I mean? Like, this is the end of the friendship.
It certainly brings up those feelings. It's understandable that it would bring up that similar flavor of emotion, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I've had I've had fights, like pretty bad fights with people I deeply care about, but we are still very much close to each other.
It's the human experience, and I think we lose sight of the fact that that's normal. Like, it's not everything is going to be smooth sailing, but that's actually like it's like one should be suspicious of the connection if it's just too much smooth sailing. Like is everybody just smiling and nodding here? Like like I. On the flip side, I do take some comfort from my friends that I know I can jostle a bit, and they can jostle me as well, because it's like this is real. Like and I'm certainly the type of person, if somebody I care about and then they're doing something stupid or whatever, like I'll just be like, listen, no, like I'm not going to enable you to like just do this thing. Like I'm not going to be polite about it. Like I care about you, and this is ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like
of course.
Yeah.
And that kind of plays back into the point, right? So so she said, give this person the benefit, or these people the benefit of the doubt, which you totally should, because there are people that do care about you, that think you're amazing and all of that. And you know what? If this is someone that has done something to upset you, you'll feel the myriad of feelings that flare up just based on previous experiences where you've been in a similar situation and you've had a knee-jerk reaction, which is analogous to that. So you're just kind of like, oh, fuck, this is exactly what that other thing was. And and that's how we learn, right? By association. But a lot of the time, I mean, the more I've done this, you come to realize that human interaction is way more nuanced than that. And the thing is that if something has happened where someone you care about has upset you, you can turn to them and not with the intention of being confrontational or accusing them of anything, but more like, hey, when this happened or when this didn't happen, this is how I felt when that happened. I was like, was that what you were going for? Or if not, what were you going for? And there are two things that can come from that conversation. Either the other person says, oh my God, I'm so sorry, that wasn't my intention at all. This was actually what it was. That's one thing to talk about. Or on the flip side, if they say, yeah, actually that was my intention, that's another thing to talk about right there. Like, okay, fine. Why did you feel like you needed to come out and just like be that way with me? And then that opens up another conversation. So like and both can have really positive, powerful outcomes if both people are willing to have that conversation.
Yeah. No, I rate everything you're saying. It's this okay. So did I miss? It sounds stupid to say, but I'm just looking at the timeline, and I'm actually pretty happy with how this conversation has gone, because we've spoken about like some really esoteric, nerdy music production stuff for about an hour, and right now you've just illuminated some very non-trivial and non-shallow or deep points about mental health and dealing with various emotions. Is there kind of anything else you'd want to kind of add or segue or make a slight turn? Because this I like hearing about this from you, because it's quite clear that you've given it a lot of thought, and I think because of your advocacy, you're also really good at verbalizing. Like, I'm just kind of listening to what you're saying as you were saying it, and I was kind of taking note of my sort of interjections, and how I was just noticing how much better you have such better language for describing the things we're talking about than I do, and I think that really shows from the fact that you have. So I mean,
that's down to like 4 years of therapy, pretty much, more than anything, I think. Yeah. I mean, I've been in therapy since I'd say April or March 2016. Quite actively. I've been in therapy a lot less over the past few months. Like, it's probably once every couple of months.
Okay.
Mainly because at this point, with, like I said, the sessions that I've had, the talks that I've had with people whom I care about, the books that I've read that are based on this exact sort of thing, and what has opened up for me after reading those books and doing the exercises in those books that were, required of me. It's just, that's what has allowed me to have this kind of language, because it's been a combination of growth as well as healing, really, because it can be very easy to just simply intellectualize a lot of stuff that you read about mental health. But the fact of the matter is that it's very fucking visceral.
It's embodied. You have to. It's one thing to intellectualize. It's another thing to feel, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is that, you know, there's a, for anyone who is interested, there's a book that I read in the middle of last year, which is a book that I feel had a profound effect on who I was as a person. It is a book by an author called Louise Hay. Mm-hmm. It's called You Can Heal Your Life.
Okay.
It is fine. It is your quintessential self-help book, sure. But the exercises that are in that book that she asks you to do can be very profound. A lot of them, to people who haven't really spent a lot of time with themselves in this regard, can find it a lot of, like, shall we say, mumbo jumbo. But the thing is that, look, here's a simple exercise that I do, you know, which a lot of people will just kind of like raise their eyebrows at or just squint at and just be like, fuck, really? Bro, you serious? Look at yourself in the mirror, mm-hmm. all right, without any distractions. And if you can do it 10 times, looking at yourself in the eye, saying, I love you, let's see how uncomfortable you get when you do that, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah, because like, I remember the first time I stood in front of the mirror and just like tried to tell myself, I love you. I was like, yeah, this is weird. This is really awkward and it's kind of stupid.
I think I would struggle with it, honestly. Like, I'm thinking about it as you're saying it, and I'm, you know, it's like I'm not feeling any judgment towards the exercise or even towards you, and I'm like, oh, this sounds like a good idea. I'm sure it's beneficial. But then, as you were describing it, I'm like, well, would I do it? Could I do it? And I'm just like, I'm sitting in a room where there's a mirror, you know, like I can't see, you know, but I'm just imagining, and it's like, yeah, man, I would actually struggle to do that. The last time not the last time, I think it happens pretty regularly, but I mean, I have this memory of just being on an isolated acid trip. I was going through like a very emotional situation, and I decided that the way that I was going to get through it was I was going to do some LSD and remain in my home by myself, which is maybe not recommended by most people. And I only bring it up, and it could be a tangent, and I apologize for that, but it's just what you were saying reminded me of this. The last time that I had a sincere moment of just like looking at myself in the mirror and just like looking into my own eyes was when I was on this kind of acid trip, cooped up in my room, just trying to figure out this emotional situation that I was going through. But I don't know why I felt like bringing that up. But I was, while you were describing that, I was like, man, what could I do that? Like, can I do that right now?
But do you remember how you felt when you were looking at yourself in the mirror?
At that time, I felt quite sad. You know, I was like, you know, we still go through this. It's like, I don't, above and like, I am my project. Unfortunately, sometimes I feel that way. So, you know, I'm a person who's nomadic. I don't have I've been in Bombay for 3 years, over 3 years straight, but the way my life is set up is that I'm nomadic. I don't have a specific geographic location. I don't have any brothers or sisters. You know, I have just one parent remaining who usually lives in another city. She's here with me for lockdown. But so sometimes I'm just like, you know, who am I? What am I doing? Like when you don't have really a sense of family and, you know, where do you even belong? I'm really lucky. I have lots of wonderful friends that are quite close, but sure. In the moment when you're looking at yourself, you're like, well, what am I beyond these projects that I do? You know, that's what I feel like sometimes when I look into the mirror and I look into my own eyes. You know what I mean?
And that's a difficult space to be in, because especially, you know, when you are, by you I mean any of us, when you're in a creative space. You know, a lot of, you know, you take so much pride in what you do, and a lot of your identity is based on, like you said, the project that you're working on, the art that you create. Yeah. And that sometimes that can be exciting where something comes up that is amazing. You're like, oh my God, I'm so glad that this came out of me, or I've been part of this in some way. But then when there are days that just nothing is coming out of you, you're just kind of like, well, all right, I guess I'm just not the person I thought I was. And then you just kind of spiral again. And it's tough, man. I get it. It's tough. But I think, again, this is not something that happens overnight. Like I for a long time searched for like these magic bullets that would I think that as soon as I read them or heard them, a penny would drop in my head and I'd just have an aha moment, and then everything would be all sunshine and butterflies. It's really just, that's all bullshit. It's really just it's practice, really.
Practice is the word. It's a path. It's a daily practice. It's something you do every day. It's not a destination that you get
absolutely.
to. And I think we make this mistake with our mental health, and we make it with our art as well. It's not a destination. It's a thing that you do, that you show up every day. And you just do the work every day.
Yeah, of course. And even with the things that you mentioned, you get, it's so easy to get so wrapped up in your art, and a lot of people do that. Some people create incredible art, but then some people also get consumed by it, and then that's another deadly spiral to go down as well.
Have you ever seen that TED Talk by Elizabeth Gilbert? She's the author of Eat, Pray, Love, which is a book I've never read, and it seems, based on the title, like a book I probably wouldn't actively seek out. But I stumbled on this TED Talk when I was on a phase of just various TED Talks. This is from some years ago. But are you familiar with the one I'm talking about?
I feel like I might be, because as soon as you said the author of Eat, Pray, Love, I have a feeling I might have. But what was she talking about?
So she has two TED Talks about basically mental health as it relates to creatives, and both are excellent. The one I'm talking about is the title of it is something like Unleashing Your Creative Genius,
inner muse or genie.
Yeah, something about inner genius. And so she was talking about how in our current world, we think of the word genius as something that somebody is, like so and so is a creative genius. But back in the day, the genius was a reference to something outside of the person. Like you wouldn't say this person is a genius. You would say this person has a genius, as in the genius visits them. And she goes on to basically, she starts off the talk talking about like, hey, like mental health is such a problem. You have so many creatives, authors, writers, musicians, painters, whatever, that they struggle, they take their own lives, so on and so forth. And this can't be how we accept, we can't accept that this is the situation for creative people. Right. And creatives are so often bothered by, their work, just kind of like I said earlier, like, am I only my projects? And so she she gives two really interesting examples of how two artists. One, she talks about Tom Waits. He's like driving down the highway and he's speeding down the highway, and an idea for a song comes into his head. And he just has no way of writing down the song because he's speeding down the highway and he can't write it down. And he knows he's going to forget it. And so, instead of getting frustrated, he just like looks, into his rear view mirror where he imagines the song is, where the idea exists. And he's like, hey, like if you can't come and visit me when I can actually write you down, then can't you just go bother somebody else? Can't you go bother some other songwriter? and then there was another anecdote. She talked about an American poet whose name escapes me, but basically this poet, she grew up on a farm, and she would see her poems coming over the countryside, and she would have to run back into her house or into her home to catch the poem in order to write it down. And there would be some instances in which she wouldn't make it home in time to physically catch the poem, physically, obviously, using that term loosely, but for her, that's what it was like. She wouldn't be able to get home quickly enough to grab the poem out of the air and write it down. And then there were other instances where she'd just be like a little bit behind the poem, and she would get to the poem and grab it from behind. And she would, when she would grab it from behind, she would end up writing the poem perfectly, but backwards, and then she'd have to flip it. So that's how
so fascinating.
That's how real it was. But so then when she heard Elizabeth Gilbert obviously was a struggling author, for many years when she was trying to write her, initial masterpiece or whatever you want to call it that brought her to where she is today. And she was struggling with this idea, you know, like just writer's block and judging herself, feeling insecure about, you know, her inability to do the thing that she says that she is, right? Like, you know, I'm an author, or, you know, we're musicians or whatever. When we can't do the thing, then it affects how we feel. And so when she studied this and like learned about these stories, you know, according to this TED Talk, and I guess I'm just repeating a TED Talk that anybody can look up online, so she applied it to her own life, and she started to think of the genius as something that visits rather than something that's supposed to be in her. And that like her job was just to show up to work every day. Like show up and sit and you know, if the thing sucks, then it's the genius's fault. Like I showed up, and like when this book is done, and if it sucks, then like, look, man, I showed up to work every day. And she would kind of externalize this, you know, outside of her, and it I guess I'm inferring beyond the TED Talk, but it sort of allows you to think of yourself as not only the things you're doing, the projects you're doing, you know, like fundamentally as human beings we're something else, and it's not tied to these ephemeral things that we're doing, and we need to derive our sense of self and sense of value from something. Obviously what we do is important, but of course, you know, but
what we do is not. It's unfair to you, to anyone, to say what you do is who you are, because I mean, as soon as that's taken away, and it can be taken away, then what are you? You know, like so, and by taken away, it could be anything as simple as like, look, if you're an athlete and then you find yourself in an accident where, you know, you might not be able to use a certain limb again, then, you know, if I can only imagine how terrible that might feel. But then if so much of someone's sense of self is associated with that thing, then what happens next? I mean, like for example, even with me, like if I by chance had an accident where I went deaf, for instance, oh shit, I don't know what I would do. You know, like I mean, my ears are basically what I use on a daily basis for what I do, what we both use. So, but yeah, I mean, I feel that as much as we work on it, and we're always works in progress, at the end of the day, even though, like I said, there's some things that I might have more intellectualized rather than internalized as real knowledge. So like, you know, if I am presented with a situation which makes me feel uncomfortable or makes me feel sad, I will feel uncomfortable or I will feel sad. I mean, it's just like learning to use those tools at those points in time to just say, all right, this is what's happening. Now I need to figure out a way to get myself up, because I know that I've been in this place before and I know I have the tools to get myself out of it. It's really just, it boils down to practice.
And ultimately we got to show up for work, whatever we define work to be, regardless, right?
Yeah, like we got to show up for work.
I like that. I like the phrase "inspiration is for amateurs." You know, that's helped me quite a bit, particularly since I moved to Bombay. Because when I first moved to Bombay, I was expecting that I might actually quit music production. I didn't really know what I was going to be doing. I certainly had no expectation that I would get mixed up with you crazy bunch of wonderful people, and referring to the scene at large that has, for the most part, treated me very much like as if I belong, which is amazing. But I had no expectation that I would meet anybody, and I really didn't think I was going to be. I didn't know if I was going to get the chance to continue doing this. And the idea of inspiration is for amateurs. You know, like.
Yeah, I like that.
Sometimes, like, you know, I don't feel like maybe today's not the day. I'm not in the zone to do. And it's just like, man, just turn on bloody Ableton, turn on the Pro Tools, and do a thing.
And just do it.
You know, like, it might suck. It doesn't matter. You know, there's been this has been reinforced for me a few times. The inspiration is for amateurs, certainly. There was another instance where I was exposed to this YouTube series, Beat the Clock, where you have all these different producers that try to make like a beat within 10 minutes. And
I remember that.
And it was another scenario. Like you have like respected artists, particularly the one that stands out was Fortet, who is a critically acclaimed, electronic producer, a musician. And when he was working, he was just not judging. You could just tell he was not judging himself. He was just in the flow of doing the thing. And he was not concerned about whether the thing he comes up with at the end sucks or not or whatever, just full acceptance. Let's just go. And that one video really had a profound impact on me and how I've been kind of working ever since. And that's kind of actually like the beat tape that I'm going to be releasing pretty soon. Most of the beats, well, all of the beats on that thing were composed with that type of spirit in mind. Like, let me just show up. I don't care. Like, they were all composed via brute force. You know, like I just picked a random Hindi song that I just dumped it into Ableton and just had at it. I didn't have any idea of what I wanted to do. Tried to just go as quickly as possible. And that removal of judgment, it's like there'll be plenty of time to judge it when it's done, but also, you know, there'll be plenty of people that will judge it for you. You don't need to worry about doing that to yourself. You're exactly like, just be immersed in the process, be immersed in the flow. And I mean, I don't know how off topic that is from what we were talking about, but
I mean, I don't think it is. I feel like it's actually interestingly a nice way to kind of sum up most of what we were talking about overall anyway.
Brings it back to music.
Brings it back to music for sure.
We've been speaking for about an hour and a half. Yes. I don't necessarily want to end the conversation unless you have somewhere to be.
I mean, I did hear my door knock just now, so I might need to. But I feel like we could definitely talk more about stuff in general. Anyway, we could do like a part 2 if you want.
We could do a part 2 before. You got to answer your door. But should we leave with you people with some social media context? Did we go over that already, or do we need to tell people?
I mean, we could, sure. Yeah. Okay, so
like if people want to follow you on what's the best platform to follow you, what are some of the projects you've done, like what's, you know, or
okay, so I mean, I'm on Instagram. I go by my handle Bully Bainbridge, so that's Bulli, Bainbridge Bain Bridge, basically is what it is. And that's the main spot to find me. But as far as music is concerned, Bully Bainbridge is basically like my stage name, so I've also put out my own album out in that way. So I would say that would be like the main spot to find out what I'm doing, whether it's in terms of mental health or in terms of music. There's a whole bunch of albums out that I've been lucky to have worked on, so I'm sure you'll find something or the other on there.
Okay, well, I guess I should let you answer your door.
Great. Thank you. Thanks a lot, man, for having me.
Thank you for speaking to me. I'm really glad we got to do this.
All right, cool, man. Thanks so much. This was fun. Take care. See you soon.